Welcome to the Multidimensional Evolution Podcast. I am your host, Kim McCall. If you want to find out more about life beyond the physical dimension, this is the place to be. We will be having conversations to expand your consciousness and help you reconnect with your essential self. But given the subject matter's a request, don't believe in anything, including what is shared here. Experiment, have your own experiences, and always use discernment. Welcome to episode 2, where I'm talking with Tathiana Mota, author of Intermissive Course, Have You Prepared Yourself for the Challenges of Human Life? Tathiana is originally from Manaus, Brazil, but currently lives in Brisbane, Australia. She is a translator, educator, and has dabbled in many other professions. But today she will be talking about her long-standing passion and research interest in consciousness and life beyond the physical. Tathiana has been a volunteer with different consciousness research organizations in Brazil for more than 25 years, and for much of that time has run workshops and lectured in the discipline of Conscientiology, a particular approach to studying consciousness that was developed in Brazil. Today she will be talking about her book, which is just about to be released in English, and we will discuss what it means to prepare yourself before birth for your current life, and how you can know if you have. If you've ever had the feeling that you're here for a purpose, but not quite been able to put your finger on it, you do not want to miss this episode. Hey Tathiana, it's so lovely to have you on. Thank you very much for coming and joining me on the Multidimensional Evolution Podcast, as the first interviewee. I'm so excited to have you on.
Hi, Kim. It's my absolute pleasure to be here today to chat about such an interesting theme. And thank you so much for the invitation.
So Conscientiology is something that you've been involved in for a very long time. Could you tell people a bit about Conscientiology? What is it?
Yes, sure. Conscientiology is the science of the consciousness, which is the personality as a whole beyond the brain and the material dimension. So when I talk about conscientiology, Kim, I usually think about us, as consciousness, our personality, which goes beyond our body, this material life, and involves multiple lives, the bioenergies. So conscientiology is a pretty broad science, which was proposed by Dr. Valdo Vieira, a Brazilian researcher of the consciousness and parapsychic phenomena. He's been researching all kinds of parapsychic experiences in himself and other researchers for many, many years. And he has written treatises and books and all kinds of research about the consciousness and the experiences we have in bioenergies and out-of-body experiences as well. So I know that conscientiology is a very broad science. We study the consciousness through all kinds of themes. So we can study I can study myself as a consciousness in dealing with other people, relating to my own issues, my own needs, my own talents. So when we say we study the consciousness, we use what we call the Consciential Paradigm, which is a technical way of doing research of the consciousness, but always taking our own consciousness into consideration. And the results of these kinds of research aim mainly our evolution, which means we are becoming more mature by studying ourselves and the other people in order to overcome our difficulties and using our talents the best way for our evolution and the evolution of others.
Okay, so yeah, I was intrigued because you mentioned the word science a few times, conscientiology as a science, but you also seem to say that really what we're studying is ourselves, which I guess when I think of science, I often think of us studying something outside of ourselves, trying to understand the physics in the world around us better, or the chemistry, which might relate to us, but it's not exactly like me studying myself. So how do I, in conscientiology, study my own consciousness? What would be maybe two or three techniques that you would use?
Oh, that's a very interesting question because, in science in general, the object of your research is outside of yourself. You cannot, contaminate your research with yourself.
Yes.
And this is what intrigued me and motivated me the most when I got to, know about conscientiology, because the techniques proposed by Dr. Vieira help assists the researcher to um, be the researcher and the guinea pig as well.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I can research myself through the results of what I have been doing in my life. I can pick, for example, as an object of research a fact that happened during my day, and I will use that fact to draw conclusions about my own way of, behaving
Okay. So for
and
example,
acting.
sorry, but I'm just curious. It made me think if I'm spending the day at work and I have a very stressful situation with a colleague. That would be the kind of situation that you could use as a study point.
Exactly. So, for example, this happens with all of us, right? You have that person at work you just cannot stand, or sometimes they are your boss, sometimes they are just a colleague. And so when we study, we apply conscientiology techniques to study this kind of fact. We are going to, for example, analyze that fact that happened at work with that person and check, for example, the level of the bioenergies I had at that moment, which is one point of research I can do, drawing conclusions about that fact,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty practical.
Maybe you could just, sorry, Tathiana, but you've mentioned this word a few times, bioenergies. Could you just explain what you mean by that?
Sure, yeah. So one of the points we do research in conscientiology is the bioenergies. So it is a fact that all of us have the physical body that we all know when we are aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in conscientiology, one other body that we assume we have, and it's one important point of research for us, is the bioenergy. So we do, as consciousness, have the human body and the bioenergies as well. These bioenergies are a reflection of who we are, what we think, how we feel, and it's always changing. Like the quality of this energy changes for better or worse according to the way we are thinking, how we are feeling, and
Okay.
So this is a very relevant point of self-research in conscientiology. So through the reading of the energies of the place, of people, and of yourself, you are able to draw conclusions of yourself and research about this and write about this and draw your own conclusions. So in this example we just were talking about at work.
Yes.
So this would be an interesting point of self-research in conscientiology. So through the energies you can read, the atmosphere of the place, or how someone you are interacting with is, how they are feeling, how their energies are, and you can act either in a positive way to help someone and to make the atmosphere more positive, or if you're not lucid, or if you're not proactive in terms of assisting the place or the other people, you can even make it worse through your thoughts and your energies.
Okay. So we're really responsible then in those situations, yeah? How we show up makes
Exactly.
a big difference.
So in conscientiology, this simple example can give you so much information, Kim, about the environment, about how you act or you should have acted, and we do need to make this kind of research very technical. So in conscientiology, we have hundreds and thousands of techniques to draw conclusions about this simple example I gave to you, and act in a way that we'll be able to, mature ourselves to become more evolved in the future.
Become more mature.
So more mature, exactly. So if I could say, like, what is the aim of conscientiology? Is the aim of conscientiology the research of the consciousness? Yes, it is, but it's not, the biggest or the highest achievement a conscientiological research would get. So the main objective or the main goal of conscientiology is to use science research, technical research, in order to research your own self and the others around you, in order to plan and change your behavior, your traits, to become more mature and assistential. So this would help, humanity in the end as a whole.
So it's really it's a personal growth tool, if I understand it, which really focuses on us in a multidimensional way beyond the physical.
That's it. I even would like to just go further in this, what you have just said. So in conscientiology, we have some main points of research, which one of them I have already told you, which is the bioenergies. So this is one point of focus we have. The other one, which we call the psychosoma, which is always called as the spiritual body or the soul in religious studies.
Yes.
So this is one of the bodies we do have as a consciousness. We all do have this other body, which you call the psychosoma,
yes.
which is a body that we are able to use when we are, for example, having an out-of-the-body experience. So we see ourselves in another dimension, which is pretty common if you just Google it, out-of-body experience, or, a projection or projection of the consciousness. You're going to see tons of people experiencing this kind of, phenomena, and they don't even know what is it about,
Mm.
or that there is a lot of science behind all that. So this is also one of our main points of research, the psychosoma.
Yeah.
And another body that the consciousness has and that we do research is what we call the mental soma, which is our mental body, the body that is the main, center of our reasoning, of our intellectuality, of our main, our biggest, or more evolved talents.
Okay.
So we do research all these bodies in a very technical way in Conscientiology.
Yeah. And I guess, we're going to very shortly start talking about the Intermissive Course, that book that you wrote, and the courses that we do before our lifetime. And in terms of the bodies, I'm guessing when we do the Intermissive Course, we're in the psychosoma, right? Where that's where we are at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But just before we get to that, which I think will be really, relevant to a lot of people that are listening to this, because a lot of people drawn to these topics are likely to have done an intermissive course. But before we get to that, I'm just curious how you personally, what was it that triggered for you the interest in conscientiology? Because it is fairly unusual, it is I guess, for people to give as much time as you have to something like the study of consciousness in the way you've described it. So I'm guessing there was some event or what happened that brought you into this?
Well, this is very interesting because since I was a kid, I remember one of the first memories I remember is feeling this nostalgia for people or places I didn't know.
Okay, yes.
So it was pretty funny because I used to. It was a very interesting memory, Kim. I was around my maybe 5, 6 years old, and I used to go to the swimming pool we had at home and just stay there, like looking at the sky
Mm-hmm.
and feeling that sense of nostalgia. I didn't know, about who or where, what was I missing,
Yes,
like
yes.
who was I missing? Who are these people I was missing? And these places I didn't know, but I just had the feeling. And while I was growing up, I always felt that the first thing, I was not only, a human body that would
Mm-hmm.
have just this life and then die and then it was over. Um, and I also had this feeling I had some task to do in my life.
Yes.
I didn't know what, I didn't know when, I didn't know who or what I would do with whom, but I had this innate sense that I had something to do in this life. But I had no idea of, I had an existential program or a mission in my life, or I didn't know anything about bioenergies or conscientiology. But when I became an adolescent, I started having out-of-body experiences. And it didn't actually scare me at all. It was very interesting and exciting to me. I was going to bed, I was sleeping, and then I felt I was out of my body in a more subtle body, which is the psychosoma. Now I know
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And, I was just feeling I was like flying, in the sky and feeling that great sense of freedom. And then I woke up very energized and happy. So it wasn't scary at all to me. And and then I got to know about conscientiology, and before that I studied out of body experiences in the religious field, in the all kinds of different studies people do about parapsychism.
And I might just say, sorry, Tathiana, because when you say out of body experiences in the religious field, I think for a lot of listeners that might seem surprising, because a lot of religion doesn't deal with that. But I think in Brazil, I'm assuming you're talking about the spiritualist
That's what I
religion.
was going.
Yes?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to tell you. I am originally from Brazil, and what is interesting in Brazil is that lots of different kinds of religion do talk about parapsychic phenomena, and also many kinds of mystic studies. And so it's pretty common in Brazil for you to hear people talking about, let's say, spiritual experiences, but
Yes.
not in a technical way, more like of, a personal experience, or some kind of, religious feeling, or mystic feeling they had. And
Yeah.
that's very common.
Well,
But
sorry, I just want to interject because it makes me think when I was living in Brazil and I was teaching English, as well as being there to study Conscientiology, but I was teaching English, and so many of my students, when we started talking about what I was doing, would tell me about their out-of-body experiences and their spirit experiences. I was very surprised that it would have just not happened in Europe.
exactly. So it's, these kinds of experience are common everywhere on the planet. But what is interesting in Brazil is that, due to this, I guess the culture, people are more open and they talk more about these kinds of experience. So, which is a good thing.
Mm.
But sometimes it's pretty more like in a more not scientifical way. It's more like in a talk about feelings and sensations. And but it's a good thing that we, in the Brazilian culture, you have this openness to talk about all kinds of phenomena people have. But still, going back to my experience, I got to know about Conscientiology in 1994, and I was young and preparing my studies to start my life. And when I got to know about the science, I was very impacted because of how technical the research of the consciousness could be. And I had never found this anywhere, where I looked for. I was looking for something like in religion, in mystical groups,
Yes.
that didn't quite match, what was I was looking for.
Yes.
And since I'm not a religious person, even though I respect all kinds of religions, I have never been a religious person. So it didn't quite match, my needs. And when I got to find a science that researches, the consciousness, that I would be able to use these tools to research myself and to become more evolved as a human, or as a consciousness, and also studying everything I was looking for, like bioenergies or the experiences I was having as OBEs, or out of body experiences, in such a technical way. So that's why I got really excited. And then I started studying the science, doing courses, but it actually became part of my main goal in life when it was around 1997, when a friend of mine had a car accident and passed away. So that was really, really, it was an awful experience to me. But at the same time, it triggered my need, to understand more about multi-dimensions and how to use my energies to help people, to help him at first, of course. And so I started to study everything I could, aiming to help him somehow wherever he was.
Yes. Okay.
And that's when I came back to the Conscientiology courses, and then never stopped studying Conscientiology, becoming a volunteer and an instructor and a writer, and here I am.
Yeah. Here you are. That's lovely. And I guess, from what you've shared, that it is in that space that you found what you were looking for when you were a little girl, looking for something you didn't know what. Would that be right? You found the people and the places through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that everyone has, to find conscientiology as a main, goal in life. Everyone has their own mission, their own groups they need to find. And so this is one of the main things I know that excites me about researching the consciousness, is that we all are different and we have different needs and different missions in life. And that's what makes, diversity wonderful.
Yes.
But from my experience, the fact that I was looking during my life, I was looking for something I didn't know, but I was loyal to that feeling, Kim, like I need to find that. I didn't forget this,
yes.
feeling I had inside myself. So this is the most important thing. Sometimes people have these kinds of feelings. They need to find, their group, their friends, like
Yes.
the people they need to do something together in this life. And sometimes they forget, or they just ignore it, and they go and just have their lives and their work, and that's it. And then they get depressed and not motivated with their lives anymore. So as like when I was a kid and had all these, that nostalgia I was talking about, and it spent like many years in my life till I found a place where I found I belonged with. So the feeling of happiness, it's not just an excitement, it's a deep feeling of being where you have to be and being with the group you need to work with to do something bigger.
Yes.
A sense of responsibility. So this gave me a lot of self, a sense of self-achievement and happiness, which is, something that people need to think about. That this is very important.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Tathiana. Yeah, and I think that listening to ourselves, how important that is for all of us to, we're here for a purpose, and I really want to talk about that in a sec, the purpose of the intermissive that gets developed in the Intermissive Course. But for us to listen, only we can know what that is, and for us to listen to ourselves is such a lovely message. Thank you for that.
Yeah, all right. That's, Kim, just to, you were talking there, I was thinking here. One of the main benefits of studying conscientiology to myself is the fact that the tools we have in conscientiology can be used to anyone, because the object of research is ourselves. So the results are going to be different to each one of us. But, while we do the research and we come into our own conclusions and we discuss about these conclusions, we can make science grow, because we see there are points of, affinity in the research. We have sometimes same results, applying techniques, and but the consciousness is only one. I am different from you. You are different from everyone else, and I am as well. So this is what is really exciting to me about researching the consciousness. We always have different results.
Yeah.
But the discussion can show us that we all consciousness have many things in common, many needs, that it doesn't matter if you are if you are in an Australian, I'm a Brazilian. It doesn't matter if another person is New Zealander or Thai, or if we are black or white, or it doesn't matter what beliefs we have, but the consciousness is has needs that we all have.
Yes.
And we can use these tools, to become more evolved.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to share a couple of tools at the end of this podcast with us,
yes.
which I'm really looking forward to. So now let us talk about the Intermissive Course, Tathiana. So what is it? What is an Intermissive Course?
The Intermissive Course is an advanced educational model of, with disciplines in most diverse areas that are organized to students who are at the moment in an extra-physical dimension. What do I mean by that? When we die, when we discard this get rid of this physical body, we keep living as a consciousness using another body, which is the body I called before, the psychosoma, or the spiritual body, or
Yes.
the soul.
Yeah.
So when we continue our extra physical life as an extra physical consciousness, we are able to enroll in extra physical courses that are not, in the material world, in the human world we are now. So these courses, they aim to qualify us and to help us accelerate our evolution, and with all kinds of disciplines and techniques, so we can prepare our upcoming life. So when I talk about an upcoming life, I'm assuming that, and this is one of the premises of Conscientiology, that we are now in this life here, 2019, in Australia, and but this is not the only life we had, and this is not the last life we're gonna have. So we assume that we've had previous lives before, and this is our current life, and then after we die, we are going to continue having future lives in the future. But between one material life and the other, we have this period. We are going to be in another dimension, which we call the extra-physical dimension. And we can't be as lucid as we are now, leading our lives in a different way, but with the same, the same consciousness we are now, the same consciousness we have now, or even more lucid. And when we are more lucid in the extra-physical dimensions, we aim to look for, some kinds of qualifications for the next life, or for the future life, the upcoming life, so we can make the most out of that future life in terms of evolution. So the Intermissive course is a very technical course that can prepare us for the future life, giving us tools to overcome our difficulties, or traits, or bad traits, let's say it like this.
Yeah.
And using our best traits, or qualities, or talents to overcome, the difficulties in life. And so in the end, we are able to plan a life project or a life mission in order to evolve. So I don't know if it was clear, or if you have any other questions about the definition of Intermissive Course, Kim.
No, I think that was pretty clear. I mean, what came up for me as you were talking was, it sounds like it's, an ideal preparation. So really, everybody should be doing that, right? It sounds like well, does everybody do that? Is it something that we all do to prepare ourselves for this life?
Not really, Kim. Just like in our lives here, like our human life right now,
Yeah.
there are people who really, enjoy looking for studies and getting more education. And some others really don't, are not interested or don't care about it. So an intermissive course is the same thing. So people who are interested in study more about themselves and their future life apply for these kinds of courses, or even are invited to enroll in these courses. But some other people are either not interested or don't have really, enough um, background to participate. Just like any other course, like, if you're going to the university, or if you're going to you want to study to become a PhD, but you don't have a bachelor's yet, you don't have, a background yet.
Yeah.
So we can say that the intermissive course is a very advanced course.
Okay.
It's because it has to do with your own, like with researching your own self, which is a huge challenge, like getting to know, your dark side, as well as, your superpowers, your super talents that sometimes you don't even know you've had, because you're not used to it. You don't have a whole lucidity of, what you have achieved in your previous lives, for example, now.
Yes.
But in the intermissive course, you will be able to, download all this information and study with this in a technical way to prepare a future life with a life project. So it's a very technical course, and sometimes people are just not interested in doing that. It's just not, for them at the moment. So we can say that most of people at this evolutionary moment and on the planet are not really keen on study themselves and applying for these kinds of courses while they are in the extra physical dimension.
Okay. Yeah, I found it interesting that you mentioned studying our dark side as well as our superpowers. So what do you mean by the dark side? What sort of things do we look at there?
Yeah, when we study ourselves, and I'm using here like my background in Conscientiology, um, in order to evolve, in order to become more mature as a consciousness, we need to study not only, our talents, but also, the difficulties we have, the bad traits we have, or difficulties, to deal with our lives and ourselves, which is sometimes not exciting,
Yeah.
It's not, sometimes we are not very interested to know, what the, what we need to change. We are just in our comfort zone. We just are sometimes fantasizing about who we really are. But when you really sit at your desk and get a blank piece of paper, and need to write about your traits, the good and the bad ones, this is a real challenge. Sometimes it's very difficult for some people.
To see
And
ourselves. Sorry.
exactly,
Yeah. Yep. To see
to see
ourselves.
ourselves as we really are. So when I say the dark side, why I mean like the bad traits we have, the vices we have, our self-corruptions, the things we know we cannot do, but we keep on doing, treating people badly, or doing bad things for our health, or not taking care of important priorities we have in our lives. And
Yes.
sometimes you just, ignore this. This is boring. This is not good. Let's have fun. Let's, life is too hard already. Why are we going to think about this? And so this is what I mean by the dark side, It's the things we really don't, it's not interested to study. But, the interesting thing, Kim, is that when we start studying ourselves in a very technical way, as it is proposed in Conscientiology, as we are the researcher and the object of study. So we use our most advanced qualities and traits, our intellectuality, our rationality, to research ourselves. So we don't give that heavy emotional, response to these traits. So it's more into a technical way. How can I overcome these bad traits I have?
Yes.
And what techniques I have?
Yeah.
And how can I apply that in my everyday life? And then I'm going to apply that at work, with my family, with my friends. And then I'm going to go back home and see the results of that. What percentage of these changes I've planned have been actually applied or not? What can I do now to make it, to apply these techniques in order to have it a more effective result? So this is this is exactly what happens in the Intermissive Course. So we are going to research ourselves in the extra-physical dimensions with very technical support, so we can see these, difficult traits we have, or self-corruptions, or difficulties, but in a very technical way, in order to overcome them.
So that sounds really quite empowering, so that you're stepping away from beating yourself up or thinking about things in terms of guilt or shame, and moving past that. Yeah.
This doesn't help anyone. We've seen that for millennia in religions, in how people, treat themselves and the others. When you have guilt, this doesn't really help yourself or anyone. So if I had a magical wand, if I could get rid of something on earth, I would get rid of guilt, because it really doesn't help anyone,
Yeah. Wow, that would be a world-changing magic trick if you did that.
Exactly. How can anyone have invented anything like that before so far? Because when you are guilty, we just are blind. We don't see a way out of that problem. We don't see a way of, overcoming any difficulty. So the best tool for me is to use our, intellectual, traits or rationality, to study ourselves in a very technical way, so we can really use science and techniques to change our behavior or environment for real, not just in our mind, to make a big difference in society through our own change. So this is what means for me at most.
Yeah. And now you mentioned, I think one point that's important here, you mentioned life project before. So during this intermissive course, we are preparing some kind of very particular actions and achievements that we want to have for the next life. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yes, sure. So when we are in the extra-physical dimension doing an intermissive course, we are there is basically, if you let me, I can explain like the phases of the intermissive course.
Yes, please.
I've researched. From what I've researched, about the Intermissive Course and interviewed other researchers and studied all the references from Dr. Vieira, who is the one who actually proposed the theory of the Intermissive Course. So there are two phases we have after we enroll in these courses. So the first phase is the self-research of the personal biography. So this means we are going to do what I have told you before, like, study our talents or difficulties, the traits, all the traits we have in our previous lives.
Yes.
So these disciplines we have in this first phase of the Intermissive Course, we just dive into our micro-universe, and we have, of course, the support of very experienced teachers and professors and preceptors, or, people who will support us and guide us into this self-research.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to identify our talents, our potentialities, the best traits we've had, because this is what will give us strength, to overcome difficulties in life. So we need to be very aware of the tools we have to use them in the intraphysical life.
Yes.
So, but we are also going to study, our fissures, our gaps, the omissions we had in previous lives, what we knew we had to do when we didn't, the people we had, for example, to have a good relationship and we didn't, or embarrassments, which is not good to study. But this will lead us to a high level of, self-awareness, which gives us a lot of power in terms of self-confidence, to deal with future challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And all this study ends up in what we call in Conscientiology the personal evolutionary register, which is a registration of all our personal, talents, achievements. It's like a huge book about our own selves, where we have all the, the glossaries, the dictionaries, whatever you call it, about our own selves.
Like a book about our consciousness, a consciousness book.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So this is in the first phase of the Intermissive Course. So we are getting more aware of who we really are. So, for example, when I die after this life we are now, maybe in, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years, or even tomorrow, maybe, we never know. I will not be only Tathiana anymore. I'll be the result of all the lives I've had before, with all the background I've had before. So I need to, reassess this again. So I'll be more able to have a whole understanding of my true, like of who I really am, not just Tathiana anymore.
Yes.
So this takes time, this takes study, this takes a lot of, support. So our memory will be, regaining this information again. So this happens in the first phase of the Intermissive Course, ancient memories from various moments, all, different egos from the past.
Yeah. So are you saying, sorry, but this is really intrigues me. Are you saying that for a lot of us, when we leave this physical life, when we die, we might not experience that. So we might just continue to identify with our last identity as Kim or Tathiana or whoever.
Yes.
So it's actually specialists. It's a rare or unusual to start to integrate more fully with a full past. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's not, because it's just a matter of memory.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, our memory is at the moment. I have the memory basically of, this lifetime from where I was born until this moment. And many things I have already forgotten. Actually, I have no memory of so many things I've been through in my life. So how does it happen? Like it's just here, like maybe memories from 10, 20, 30 years ago, and I just can't remember anymore. So this happens as well after we die, and even in a deeper level, because we don't have our brain anymore. We don't have our physical brain anymore. We are going to have an extra physical brain, which is in Conscientiology, we call it para brain. Para, which means like extra physical. So all this information is very subtle. We need to regain this information, reactivate our memory to get all this information back. So sometimes what happens after we die, and it's pretty common to all of us, even those who do research, the bioenergies, or who are aware of, multidimensionality. So what happens is this shock of the death, of us getting rid of the physical body and our brain, this change for this other dimension gives some repercussions, and we need to regain this memory, and it takes sometimes a while, or even like many years, or it depends on the consciousness, it depends on the memories they have, but in order to enter an intermissive course, you need to be at least aware that you are a consciousness, that you are now, that you are not in the intraphysical dimension anymore, and that that you need, or you are looking for, studying about your future life. So if you are not aware, which is pretty common, like research from Dr. Vieira shows that for most of the consciousness on the planet at this moment, we just die, and we just don't know we have died. We just keep on thinking the same way we are, and leading our lives the same way we are. We are not lucid of our potentials in other dimensions. This is what is most common, So when we are in this first phase in the intermissive course, we are now aware. We are, in the extra physical dimension, that we are not just the person we were anymore in the previous human life, and we are now working to regain a higher level of awareness of who we really are. This can take some time, because we are like multimillenary consciousnesses. We have like multiple lives and all kinds of experiences. So sometimes I myself doubt it. I have, been really 100% aware of everything I have ever been or thought or felt before while I was in the intermissive course,
So you're saying you doubt that you've been that aware?
Yes, like 100% of all my previous lives, so all my experiences, all my, like the all the multi egos I've had. I'm not sure. I may be wrong, but I'm sure that in the intermissive course, I did have, lots of tools available for me to have a much higher level of understanding of who I really am, and the talents and, the potentialities I really have. And we all, go through this in the first phase of the intermissive course. And after we are pretty much aware of our, own selves in this first phase, then we go to the second phase in the intermissive course, which is the planning of the existential program, the upcoming, existential program in a future life. So we are going to use everything we have studied about ourselves in phase 1 now to plan a future program. And how are we going to do that? So we're going to have like more specific disciplines to support, us in order to, be more productive in future lives, to pick for ourselves some more challenging situations that will allow us to use our qualities, or best qualities, or face different situations in order to mature specific traits, specific ways of behavior we have. So the existential program, Kim, is just a way, or a form of putting us into action to to mature ourselves, just like we do with the diamond.
Yes.
So
Yes, to
people
polish,
work with the diamond to polish. Exactly, that's
to
the
make
word I was.
to take the biggest advantage of the next life for our
Exactly,
existence as a whole. Yeah,
that's it.
that makes a lot of
So
sense. Okay, I just, sorry,
yeah,
Tathiana, I'm conscious of the time, and I'm conscious of the fact that we've really just scratching the surface here. So I'm already going to flag. I think we're going to have you on again. But we've got I've got a little bit more time, and I think at this stage it probably would be really good to just tell the listeners, if you're listening to this, and if you have this feeling of, I've come here for a purpose, I've come here for a reason, maybe just tell people briefly, how can I know? How can I get clarity as to whether I did an intermissive course and what I might have planned? And then after that, maybe we can you can share those exercises that you said you would, to help people with that.
sure, perfect. So maybe I could give some practical tips, like practical exercises people can do, and this will help them reflect on whether they've had an intermissive course or not. But before doing that, it's very important to say that sometimes people say, "Oh, I don't know if I've prepared myself before being born." I sometimes feel I've had previous lives. This kind of conversation makes sense to me. It's interesting, I'm curious about it, but I have no idea if I did an intensive course, or I have not had any kind of conviction about my life or about things I have to do, so I'm not really sure. So I guess it's very important to reflect about this, because people sure may have done an intensive course before, and also, of course, they may have not, because intermissive courses are very specific courses to plan a future life, and to set goals, very very like hardcore goals, let's say it like this, challenging you to go outside your comfort zone. So sometimes people, intensive courses are only one kind of, like, the all kinds of courses someone can take while in the extra physical dimensions. There are all kinds of courses, of course, just like in the intraphysical dimension.
Yes.
But so it's very important to think about this. You may have studied an intensive course, and you don't remember. So you just need to work with your memory to regain this information.
And how do we do that?
And that's the tip I'm gonna give now.
Okay.
Okay, so there are. I thought about two very practical exercises people can do at home. So I'm gonna just talk about them like real quick, and then if you have any questions, you just ask him.
Okay.
So a very practical one, which I really like it, is just like set some time for yourself, like let's say it 1 hour. So you go to your room or a quiet place, you can stay there for this time. Maybe your room or your study room or your office, if you have one at home, that you can just go there, lock the door, and tell your family members not to disturb you for that time. Don't take cell phones, computer, or anything like that. So maybe you can get a chair, like a comfortable chair, just sit, relax. You can breathe deeper to help you relax more. If you know how to do any kind of bioenergetic work, maybe it would be interesting to do it a little, just to loosen your energy, so you'll be more like open to interact with other dimensions.
And
And if you don't know,
I'll just say on that one, Tathiana, sorry if anybody here, if you haven't listened to the first episode of this podcast, I share and talk you through a basic bioenergy exercise there, which you could listen to and apply before doing Tathiana's exercise.
no, that's awesome. But really, if you don't know any bioenergy work, it doesn't matter. Just sit, relax, breathe deeper, try to clean your mind of, problems and other, issues. Um, and, um, and take one piece of blank paper, like an A4 paper, blank paper, and a pen, and you just are going just to rewind your life till your childhood. And you're just going to think, for example, make these questions to yourself. When you were like there in your childhood, what did you want for your life? Did you have any dreams, any goals, any convictions, or anything you wanted to plan for your future? Any aims for your life? Because Kim, why this is important? Because even though you were a kid, you had just been born. Like you were closer to your extra physical life than we are now. So even though you were a kid and you had like sometimes you couldn't express yourself well, or you just not mature, of course, but sometimes these convictions are very alive, but we just didn't remember, we forget, we don't remember anymore. So sometimes people, when doing this exercise, they start remembering, accessing memories that they never
they'd
thought
forgotten
about anymore.
Yes.
They had totally forgotten. And this is sometimes shocking, because sometimes kids have pretty clear ideas of what they need, of how they think.
And then the education system comes, the education system and the parents' influence and all those, they can maybe not be aligned with what the kid actually brought.
Exactly. So it's not only I talked, like about dreams and goals in life, what I wanted to be when I became, an adult and stuff like that. But sometimes the way of thinking, how the ideas came, how I felt about the world, like my feelings, my excitements about life, about things around me, the traits I had. Sometimes I was a very curious person. So this is something sometimes that in life the person just forgot about this. It's like they have very wonderful talents they just ignore, and they just forget, and they just don't know they have actually. So this activity helps a lot with that. And then after thinking about all this, you need to write this down in this blank paper. Just write into topics. Don't just make it as summarized as possible. Just to outline like the goals you had, the convictions you had, the traits you manifested as a child. And this will lead you to some further research. But this is a great beginning, Kim.
Yes. Yeah.
And another, can I give another practical activity?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is like the first one I gave is like, level 1. Mm-hmm. It's pretty easy to do. Maybe this one is level 5 now.
Okay.
In the game.
A bit of a jump.
Okay. So this would be like a 3-hour reflection technique, mm-hmm. which is focused on the intermissive course specifically. So the same thing would apply in terms of going to a quiet place and asking family not to disturb you, no cell phones, no, computer or gadgets, just yourself and your piece of paper and pen. So you're just gonna write at the top of the paper intermissive course, and you are going to stay these 3 hours reflecting about your skills or talents, mm-hmm. your weaknesses, and your temperament. Temperament is the result of all this, how you act in your life. So you can just imagine this, but this is not a good idea in this technique, Kim. You need to give examples of everything you write. For example, let's see in my with myself, I can write this over there. I have a very balanced temperament. Okay, but give me 5 examples of that, Tathiana. Okay. Otherwise, you're just fantasizing. Are you that balanced?
Yeah.
So I then after you write either the talent you have or something positive about your skills, just give at least 1 or 2 examples to make sure you are not just imagining. So it can be something at work you did, your relation with someone that you helped, but it has to be very practical things. And you're going to do that for 3 hours. So
why is it 3 hours? Yes.
Exactly. Because the first hour, you're going to be fantasizing probably,
Okay.
You're going to be like, I feel like this or that. It's great. I'm wonderful. I'm perfect. But after the first hour, you're going to go deeper into your reflection. And then what happens is that since you are immersed in this idea and this theme, you have extra physical help of consciousnesses who are keen to help you with this research. We can see like they are sort of spirits of, more mature consciousnesses who are willing to help.
Yes.
So we call them usually helpers.
Helpers, yeah.
They are not in the intraphysical dimension here in the material dimension, but they are keen to help people who want to do this kind of self-research. So during this time, they are going to be able to help you activate memories about your intermissive course. And after the second hour, you're going to be more like, more focused and concentrated. And in the third hour, you'll be able to draw conclusions, to have ideas about your intermissive course, to have ideas of your life project, what you need to do in this life. And you're even going to have the possibility of having insights on what to do in future projects and stuff. So this is a harder technique because you need 3 hours.
Yes.
And sometimes you have no patience to do that.
Yeah.
So, but just keep on going, and I'm sure you have all kinds of, ideas and insights for yourself.
Well, I mean, that's I can really see, again, it's going to be so important to not have your phone near or any computer, because there's so many distractions now, and to actually spend 3 hours really connecting with yourself in that way, I would imagine would be valuable anyway, to get a deep amount of understanding of why we're here.
Exactly. That's why I said this second technique is like level. It's not, it's like it's harder in the game,
Yeah. Well, Tathiana, I'm sorry. Like I said, I feel we've scratched the surface. I'm really hoping you can come back, and maybe I'm sure there are so many other angles to this topic that we could talk about. You've written a whole book about it. I really encourage people. So this has just come out. It's just about to be released, in fact, in English. And if people want to find the book, I'm guessing it will be on Amazon. Do you know?
Yes, we are now just finishing the production of the book. So I believe from what I've checked this week, we'll be having the book launched in a few weeks or maybe 1 or 2 months. But it will be sure available, online, on Amazon and other, possible ways of, buying it.
Yes.
We're going to have the ebook and the book printed on demand as well. But I'm going to be, disseminating this idea online on my Facebook page, and I'll let everyone know as soon as the book is launched in English. We have we are in the second edition of the Portuguese book, but now we are working on the English version, which is going to be real exciting for me. And that's it.
Yeah, lovely. And on Facebook, people can find you on Intermissive Course, I believe, or
Yes,
your own name, or
sure. You can look for Tathiana Mota. It's my personal Facebook page, but the book page, the Intermissive Course page, is just Intermissive Course. And I'll be sharing lots of ideas about the book and the science conscientiology, bioenergies, or whatever, anyone asks about.
Yeah, that sounds like a great resource. And I also invite any listeners. You can find out more about Tathiana on the website for this podcast, multidimensionalevolution.com. And if you have questions for Tathiana, you can also send them through there, and we will try and get you on another time and address any questions that we might get. But for now, thank you so much, Tathiana. It's been lovely. And
Kim, thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure to be talking to you today. You're definitely right. We have just started talking about such an interesting subject, and there's plenty of content we could discuss about it. But thanks anyway. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode. If you want to find out more about our guest, you can find relevant links and information next to the episode on multidimensionalevolution.com. There you can also find my blog and information about my book, Multidimensional Evolution, Personal Explorations of Consciousness. I really appreciate your presence today, and I hope you will be tuning into Multidimensional Evolution podcast again in the future. Until then, here is to your very best and most conscious life.